The world stopped when my jaw shattered. Not because of the pain, but because when I hit the ground, the last thing I saw was him, Ethan Ross, standing over me. His gloves dripping with sweat, his eyes full of something that looked a lot like regret. When you've spent years hating someone, you don't expect your life to end in their arms. You definitely don't expect to wake up weeks later in their apartment, smelling their coffee, hearing their quiet humming in the kitchen. But that's exactly what happened. I'd always believed pain was simple. You get punched, you hurt, you get up. But this was something else. A fracture deep inside, not in my bones, but in my pride. My name's Noah Carter, 24, former amateur champion from New Jersey. Boxing was everything. My father taught me to fight when I was 10. He said it was the only language the world understood. Turns out, the world also understands irony, because my biggest rival, Ethan, just became my caretaker after the match that destroyed my career. When I woke up in the hospital, my jaw wired shut, my right shoulder torn, the doctor told me I'd need months of rehab. No training, no fights, no noise. But what gutted me most wasn't the injury, it was hearing that Ethan had volunteered to help with my recovery. I didn't believe it at first. Why would he? We'd hated each other since the day we met. Ethan Ross. Tall, calm, disciplined, the golden boy of the East Coast boxing circuit. Where I fought with fire, he fought with control. Where I shouted, he stayed quiet. Where I threw punches out of anger, he threw them out of precision. He was everything I wasn't. We were rivals in every sense. And that night, under the blinding lights of Madison Square Garden, he beat me fair and square. Except when I fell and hit the ground, I didn't move. They said the look on his face changed completely, that he dropped his gloves, ran to me, and held my head until the medics came. That he whispered my name like it mattered. I didn't remember that part, but I remembered waking up in a place that wasn't my home. The apartment was quiet, smelled faintly of cedar and lemon. There was a single couch, some old vinyl records, and a pair of boxing gloves hanging near the window. And there he was sitting across from me, reading a book, his jaw tight with something he couldn't say. "You're awake," he said softly. Finally. I tried to speak, but the pain shot through my mouth. He placed a hand on my shoulder gently, his fingers trembling. "Don't," he whispered. "You're safe. I'll take care of it." That was the first time I'd ever heard Ethan Ross sound afraid. Days turned into weeks. He cooked, helped me stretch, changed my bandages. We barely spoke, partly because I couldn't, partly because I didn't know how. But silence has its own language. Like the way he'd glance at me when he thought I wasn't looking. Or how his hand would linger a second too long when helping me stand. Or the way he'd flinch every time I winced in pain, like my suffering hurt him too. I started noticing small things about him I never cared to before: the scar under his left eye, the way he always hummed when making tea, the stack of old match tickets he kept in a drawer like memories he couldn't let go of. And every night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd hear him in the living room, shadowboxing silently, his movements heavy with guilt. One night I managed to whisper his name. "Ethan." He froze mid-punch. When he turned, his eyes were wide, almost scared. "You shouldn't be talking yet," he said. I smiled, or tried to. "You're worse than a nurse." He laughed, quiet, surprised, and for a moment, the air between us softened. "Maybe," he said, "but at least I don't stab you with needles." It was the first real laugh we'd shared. The first real piece of peace. After that, something began to shift. He'd talk to me more. Tell me about his past, his sister, how he almost quit boxing once. I'd listen, mouthing words I couldn't say, learning that behind the stoic fighter was someone who felt too much and showed too little. Sometimes, I'd catch him watching me like he was trying to memorize me. Other times, I'd do the same. One morning, I woke up to sunlight spilling through the blinds, and there he was dozing off in the chair next to my bed, head tilted, lips slightly parted. He looked so different from the man who'd once knocked me down, so calm, so human. For the first time, I didn't see my rival. I saw someone who had stayed, someone who cared. I reached out, brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, and in that fragile moment, I realized something terrifying. I didn't hate him anymore. In fact, I wasn't sure I ever really had. But love, especially between two men in our world, wasn't something you could just say out loud. Boxing gyms aren't built for tenderness. They're full of men who hit harder than they feel, who mock softness as weakness. If they knew Ethan and I were even close, the whispers would spread faster than a knockout punch. So we stayed quiet. But the silence grew heavier with every passing day. Until one night, during my first attempt to stand without his help, I fell hard. The pain shot through my shoulder, and I cursed under my breath. He rushed to me, caught me before I hit the floor. "Damn it, Noah," he said, voice trembling. "You're pushing too fast." "Let me fall," I muttered. "No," I said, "let me." "I can't," he shouted. His hands shook against my arms. "You don't get it, do you? I can't watch you fall again." The room went still. His breath came out ragged, his eyes wet. And suddenly it wasn't about boxing anymore. He looked away, biting his lip. "That night I thought I killed you," he whispered. "I can still hear the sound when you hit the mat. Every time I close my eyes, it's there. I didn't mean to, God. I didn't mean to." I wanted to speak, to tell him it wasn't his fault, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. He looked up, eyes searching mine. Something broke open between us then, something raw, unspoken, but real. He leaned closer, hesitating. His breath was warm against my cheek. "I shouldn't," he whispered, but neither of us pulled away. The kiss was soft, hesitant, like two people learning how to breathe again after drowning. His lips trembled. Mine hurt, but it didn't matter. For the first time in months, I felt alive. When we pulled apart, he smiled faintly. "You're impossible," he murmured. I wrote on a notepad beside my bed. "So are you." And for the first time, Ethan Ross laughed without guilt. The weeks that followed blurred into something strange and beautiful. My body healed slowly, but my heart? That was a different fight entirely. He'd still train in the mornings, but now he'd let me watch. Sometimes, he'd teach me how to move again, his hands on my waist, guiding me gently. Other times, we'd just sit in silence, listening to old records, our shoulders touching like it was the most natural thing in the world. It wasn't easy. There were days I'd break down, frustrated with how weak I felt, how dependent I'd become. But every time, he'd be there steady, patient, unyielding. He never said, "I love you." Neither did I. But we didn't have to. One night, rain poured outside, and we sat by the window, sharing a single blanket. He was staring into the dark, quiet for a long time. "You know," he said finally, "when you're better, you'll probably go back to fighting." I didn't answer. He smiled sadly. "And I'll be in the opposite corner again." I turned to him, my voice still hoarse but steady. "Maybe not." "Why?" "Because this time," I said softly, "I'd rather fight for you." He froze, eyes wide, then looked away with a shaky laugh. "You're out of your damn mind." "Maybe," I whispered, leaning closer. "But at least I'm still standing." And for the first time since that fateful match, Ethan Ross kissed me without hesitation. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes. Not the burnt, rushed kind I used to make after late-night training, but soft, buttery, golden ones that filled the apartment with warmth. Ethan stood in the kitchen, wearing a gray hoodie, sleeves rolled up, sunlight catching in his hair. I watched him quietly from the couch, my shoulders still stiff, my heart unsteady. He noticed me and smiled, just a small one, the kind that didn't ask for anything back. "Morning, champ," he said. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. "Morning." Still felt strange, being in his home, his care, his orbit. Stranger still, knowing that we'd kissed and neither of us had said a word about it since. He placed a plate in front of me. "Eat before it gets cold." I picked up the fork, took a bite. Sweet, soft, almost perfect. "You're full of surprises," I murmured. Ethan chuckled. "What, you think boxers can't cook? I think I never expected you to care enough to try." He froze for half a second, then looked away. "Yeah, well," he said quietly, "life's full of surprises too." After breakfast, he helped me stretch slow, deliberate motions that made me grit my teeth from the pain. His hands were steady, his voice patient. "Easy," he murmured. "Don't force it. You sound like a therapist," I muttered. "Guess I'm learning." When his fingers brushed the edge of my scar, I flinched. Not from pain, just the closeness. He paused, eyes searching mine. "Does it hurt?" "Not where you think." For a second, everything stopped. The world, the air, even my pulse. Then he smiled faintly and said, "Good. That means it's healing." He walked away before I could say anything else. By the third week, I could walk short distances on my own. The first time I made it across the living room, Ethan clapped like a proud coach. "See? You're getting there," he said, grinning. I rolled my eyes. "Don't treat me like your rookie student." He laughed. "You're worse than a rookie. At least they listen." But beneath the banter, something deeper brewed, an invisible current that neither of us dared to name. That night I couldn't sleep. I went out to the balcony, watching the rain smear across the city lights. Ethan joined me a few minutes later, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. "Not when the past keeps replaying in my head." He leaned against the railing beside me. "What part?" "The part where everything I worked for vanished in 10 seconds. The part where my rival turned into my savior." He sighed softly. "I didn't save you, Noah." I turned to him. "Then why did you stay?" Ethan looked down at his hands. "Because walking away felt worse." The silence between us grew thick. Rain drummed softly against the railing. I asked quietly, "Do you ever regret it? Hitting me that hard?" His jaw tightened. "Every damn day." I didn't say anything else. I just reached over and covered his hand with mine. It was cold from the rain, trembling slightly. He didn't pull away. The next few days blurred together: therapy sessions, quiet meals, late-night talks that sometimes turned into comfortable silences. We started moving like we'd known each other our whole lives, even though we'd spent most of them pretending we didn't. But the world outside didn't stop spinning just because we'd found peace in our little apartment. Word started spreading. It began with a picture someone had spotted Ethan at the rehab center with me, holding my bag, helping me walk. Then came the whispers online. "Ross and Carter? What's going on?" Ethan showed me the comments one night, his voice tight. "They're saying you moved in with me." I shrugged. "They're not wrong. That's not the point." I looked at him. "Then what is?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "You don't get it, Noah. People don't forgive things like this easily. 2 guys, same gym, rivals, this could ruin everything we worked for." I stared at him for a long moment. "Then tell me what we're supposed to do." He didn't answer. I wanted to be angry, but all I saw was fear, the kind that comes from growing up in locker rooms full of men who think love only exists in fists and sweat. So I just said quietly, "You don't have to protect me, Ethan. I chose this." "Maybe," he said softly, "but I didn't choose for you to lose everything because of me." A week later, his coach showed up. The knock came early, too early. Ethan opened the door, and there stood Coach Ramirez, built like a bulldog, eyes sharp as broken glass. "I heard the rumors," he said. "Didn't believe them until now." Ethan stiffened. "Coach, it's not," but Ramirez's eyes shifted past him, landing on me sitting on the couch, my bandaged arm in plain sight. "You've got Carter in your damn house? After what happened in the ring?" "It's temporary," Ethan said. "He's still recovering." The coach snorted. "Yeah, recovering from you breaking his face. And now you're what, his babysitter?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "Watch it." But Ramirez wasn't done. "You're throwing your career away for this pity act. You're supposed to be training for nationals, not playing nurse." My chest tightened. "I didn't ask him to." Ramirez turned to me. "You didn't have to. He's too soft for his own good." That did it. Ethan stepped forward, fists curling. "You don't get to talk about him like that." "Like what?" The coach spat. "Like the guy you nearly killed? Or like the guy you're clearly—" "Stop." Ethan's voice cracked like thunder. The room went dead silent. Ramirez's eyes narrowed, the realization sinking in. "You're kidding me," he muttered. "You're actually—" Get out, Ethan said. Ethan, I said get out. The coach glared one last time, then turned and slammed the door behind him. Ethan stood there for a long time, breathing hard. I could see the tremor in his hands. When he finally turned to me, his eyes were full of something between shame and defiance. Well, he said bitterly, guess the whole gym's gonna know now. I looked at him, my voice low but steady. Then let them. He shook his head. You don't understand. I've worked my whole life to be taken seriously. If they think I'm human, I interrupted. Because that's what you are, Ethan. Human. He didn't speak for the rest of the night. Just sat by the window, staring out at the rain again. I wanted to reach out, but I knew he needed space. I also knew what it felt like to have your whole identity crumble under the weight of other people's expectations. The next morning, he was gone. There was a note on the kitchen table. I need time. Don't wait up. I stared at the words until they blurred. The apartment felt suddenly too quiet, too cold. Days passed. No calls, no texts. I went back to therapy alone, limping through exercises that felt heavier without his voice guiding me. At night, I replayed our last conversation, wondering if I'd pushed him too hard, if love was just another kind of fight we weren't strong enough to win. On the fourth day, I turned on the TV, and there he was, Ethan Ross, back in the ring. The commentators were already talking. Ross returns tonight after weeks off. There have been rumorsome controversy, but he's here to prove himself again. I watched in silence as he stepped into the spotlight, his expression stone cold. Every punch he threw looked desperate, angry, like he was trying to hit away something invisible. By round 3, his rhythm broke. He hesitated, took a hit to the ribs, then another, and when he went down, I felt my heart stop. The crowd roared, but all I saw was the same thing from months ago, Ethan. On the ground, this time bleeding, lost, alone. I didn't think. I just grabbed my jacket and ran. The hospital smelled the same as before. I found his room, heart pounding, breath shaking. He was sitting upright, bruised, quiet. When he saw me, his eyes softened with guilt. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, I shot back. He smiled weakly. You saw the match? Yeah. You fought like a man running from himself. He laughed a small, broken sound. Guess I lost. I stepped closer. No, you didn't. You just forgot who you were fighting for. He looked up at me, eyes glassy. I can't keep doing this, Noah. Every time I try to be who they want, I lose a piece of myself. Then stop trying. It's not that simple. It is, I said firmly. You choose. Themerus. He exhaled, shoulders trembling. You think it's that easy? No, I whispered. But I think it's worth it. He stared at me for a long time before finally saying, You know what scares me most? What? That you make me want to quit fighting. Not just in the ring but everywhere else too. I smiled faintly. Then maybe that's the first fight you don't have to win. He blinked, a tear slipping down his cheek. I reached out and brushed it away. For the first time, he didn't flinch. He leaned forward until our foreheads touched. And in that quiet, sterile room, the world outside didn't matter. There were no cameras, no coaches, no judgment, just two broken fighters learning how to breathe again. That night, as he slept, I sat by his bedside and realized something. We weren't just recovering from physical wounds. We were recovering from the fear of being seen, truly seen for who we were. And maybe, just maybe, that was the hardest fight of all. A week passed before Ethan was released from the hospital. The day he came home, the city felt quieter somehow, as if the noise of the world had dimmed, leaving only us. He moved carefully, slower than before, the bruises still visible under his shirt. But his eyes, those sharp, restless eyes, looked softer now, tired but free. Feels weird being on this side of things, he said with a faint smile, dropping his duffel bag near the couch. I chuckled. What, having me take care of you for once? He grinned. Guess karma's got a sense of humor. I helped him sit down, his shoulder brushing mine. There was no hesitation now, no pulling away. Just the quiet, natural closeness of two people who had finally stopped pretending. The world outside, however, hadn't forgotten us. News outlets were still buzzing. The photo of me leaving the hospital had gone viral, our hands almost touching as we walked out together. The headlines were brutal. Rivals or lovers? Boxing's golden boy under fire. Sponsors started calling. Journalists dug into our past. Every click, every post, every whisper turned our story into something they could dissect. I hated it. Not because they were talking, but because they didn't understand. They wanted to frame it as scandal when it was simply survival. One night, I found Ethan sitting in the dark, scrolling through the noise on his phone. His face was unreadable. "You should stop looking at that," I said quietly. He didn't answer. "They'll move on," I continued. "They always do." He looked up at me, his voice low. "Yeah, but what if they don't?" I sat beside him. "Then we don't either." He stared at me, and I could see the war inside him. The boy who fought for his father's approval, for his coach's respect, for the title he thought defined him. And the man who just wanted to live honestly, even if it meant losing everything. I took his hand. "You once said walking away felt worse, so don't walk away this time." He squeezed my hand back, his thumb tracing circles against my skin. "I'm tired of running," he whispered. "Tired of fighting ghosts. Then stop fighting. Just be." And for the first time, I saw Ethan Ross, the fighter, the rival, the man I loved, finally exhale. 2 weeks later, the gym called. Ramirez had been replaced temporarily by a new trainer, someone younger, open-minded, a woman named Jess. She asked if we wanted to come by. No press, no pressure, just a workout. Ethan hesitated. "You sure about this?" I smirked. "What? Scared they'll see us holding hands?" He laughed. "More like scared you'll outbox me with one working arm. Guess we'll find out." The gym looked different that day, brighter somehow. Some people stared, others nodded. A few whispered, but none said a word loud enough to matter. Jess greeted us at the door. "Good to finally meet you both," she said, shaking my hand. "Heard a lot about the legendary fight." "Legendary for all the wrong reasons," I muttered. She smiled knowingly. "Maybe it's time to rewrite that story." Ethan started training again, not for fame this time, but for himself. I watched him move in the ring, lighter than before, like he'd finally let go of something heavy. When he glanced at me between rounds, sweat dripping down his temple, he smiled a real one. "Hey Carter," he called out. "You think you'll ever get back in here?" I tilted my head. "Only if you promise not to break me again." He grinned. "No promises." But his tone was different now, playful, tender. The rivalry that once burned between us had softened into something steadier, something that felt a lot like love disguised as laughter. As days turned into months, the noise around us faded. Some fans left, others stayed, but most just stopped caring. The scandal that once shook the boxing world became yesterday's headline. We moved into a small apartment overlooking the Hudson River. It wasn't fancy, bare walls, 2 mismatched chairs, and a single framed photo from our first championship. But it was ours. Some mornings, we trained together on the roof, gloves thudding softly in rhythm with the sunrise. Other mornings, we didn't train at all. We just sat, coffee in hand, watching the world wake up around us. It was quiet, peaceful, real. One evening, we were invited to a charity event, something about supporting injured athletes. The same reporters who once called us a disgrace to the sport now wanted us on the front page again, this time as a story of redemption. I didn't want to go. Ethan insisted. "It's time," he said. "We've been silent long enough." So we went. The lights were bright, the room full of people who still didn't quite know what to make of us. Cameras flashed as we stepped in together, his hand brushing against mine, deliberate but subtle. Halfway through the event, a young boy, maybe 12, approached us. He looked nervous, holding a crumpled ticket in his hand. "Mr. Ross? Mr. Carter?" he asked shyly. Ethan crouched to his level. "Hey champ, what's up?" The boy hesitated, then blurted, I wanted to say thank you." "For what?" I asked. For not hiding. My brother's gay and he boxes too. He thought he had to quit. But then we saw you guys. And now he doesn't. Ethan froze. I felt something tighten in my chest. The boy smiled awkwardly. So, yeah, thanks. He handed Ethan his ticket. Can you sign this? Ethan signed it, then looked up at me. His eyes were wet. After the boy left, he whispered, maybe this is why. Why what? Why it all happened. The fight, the accident, us. I nodded slowly. Maybe it wasn't about winning after all. That night, as we walked home, the city lights shimmered on the river like tiny stars. We stopped on the bridge, leaning over the railing, the cold air biting at our faces. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't hit me that night? I asked. Ethan exhaled, his breath fogging in the air. All the time. And, he smiled softly, then I wouldn't have known what it means to really fight for someone. I chuckled. You and your metaphors. He turned to me, eyes steady. No, I mean it. For once in my life, I stopped fighting for a title. I fought for something that actually mattered. I met his gaze. Us. He nodded. Yeah, us. The months that followed were slow, steady healing. We both found new rhythms. Ethan began coaching young fighters' kids who reminded him of us before the pain, before the pride. I took up writing, telling stories of resilience and love, stories that sounded a little too familiar to be coincidence. Sometimes people still whispered. Sometimes old teammates looked away. But we didn't hide anymore, because love, when it's real, stops needing permission. On the anniversary of the match that changed everything, we returned to Madison Square Garden. The arena was empty, the air thick with ghosts. We stood in the center of the ring, where it had all ended and begun. Ethan touched the ropes, eyes distant. Hard to believe, huh? Yeah, I said softly. Feels smaller than I remember. He smiled faintly. Maybe because we're not afraid of it anymore. We stood there in silence, the sound of our breathing echoing in the vast space. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 old gloves, his and mine, stitched together at the wrist. What's that? I asked. A reminder, he said, of where we broke and where we healed. He tossed them gently onto the mat, and in that moment the ghosts disappeared. Later we sat in the stands, the lights dimming around us. Ethan leaned his head against my shoulder, quiet for a long time before whispering, You ever think about forever? I smiled. Only when you're around. He laughed softly. Guess that means I should stick around, huh? You're already stuck with me. He lifted his head, eyes bright, full of warmth. Good, because I don't plan on letting go again. I leaned in, kissing him gently, the sound of our laughter echoing through the empty stadium like a victory bell. And for once, it didn't matter who saw, who knew, or who cared. We had already won. Months later, I wrote an article titled, The Fight That Saved Us. It wasn't about the punches or the pain or even the fall. It was about forgiveness. About finding strength in the places where the world told us we shouldn't. It went viral not because it was sensational, but because it was honest. For the first time, people didn't see a scandal. They saw love. And maybe that's what love really isn't, the absence of pain, but the courage to stand back up, even when the world tries to knock you down. One evening, Ethan came home late from coaching. I was on the couch, half asleep. He leaned over, kissed my forehead, and whispered, Hey, champ, still up? Always, I mumbled. He smiled. We've got a match next week. You should come. The kid's nervous. I opened my eyes. What's his name? Leo. I grinned. Tell him not to worry. If his coach survived me, he can survive anything. Ethan laughed, pulling me closer. You never change. Wouldn't be me if I did. He pressed his lips against my temple. Good. Because I fell in love with you exactly like this. The city outside buzzed, but in that small apartment filled with echoes of old dreams and new beginnings, everything was still. We weren't just 2 fighters anymore. We were survivors, lovers, home. And as I drifted off in his arms, I realized something simple, something beautiful. Sometimes the hardest punches life throws at you aren't meant to break you. They're meant to knock you into someone who will help you stand again. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.